Okay. Hi everyone again. Now, Dr. Murray Lane is our guest presenter today, and he'll be talking to us about public policy and how, I guess, from the scenario, from the point of view of rewriting the whole program, evaluating and understanding it. Why as researchers we need it, etc. Now, before I go any further, I want to do the acknowledgement to country. So, the Queensland University of Technology acknowledges the Turrbal and Yugara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QUT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. We recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning. QUT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QUT community. And as I'm located in Perth while I do this, I acknowledge the Noongar people as our First Nation owners of our lands. Now, as Murray, did you want to say anything?
No, that's
No? Okay, all right.
I'm coming from the Turrbal and Yagara land, so it's
Good.
it's interesting that you're on. What was the name again of lands where you are?
Oh, Noongar people.
Noongar, right?
Noongar, and in actual fact, where I'm living in Diane now, with the area I'm in, the Manga Noongar people.
Okay.
The owners of these lands.
I wonder if our guests know the name of where they're coming from today.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I'm on Yagara country.
Sorry?
I'm on Yagara country where I am.
Oh, you're on Yagara country. And where's that?
Oh, basically it's
state?
The Yugarapal people as well. So it's sort of out, sort of western Brisbane-ish.
Ah, okay, great. It's wonderful that you do know. Hi, Deanna. Thank you, Belinda.
Hi, Murray.
Hi, Deanna. We're just talking about the lands that we're coming from, and you've actually got it in your title, Deanna.
I do, yes.
Oh, well done. That's great. I had not thought about that. Innovation all around. Baranico?
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, my name is Bhargavi and I am from Wurundjeri land, which is Melbourne.
Lovely.
While I was typing about my research, because I'm here, I will just say it rather than typing. So I finished my PhD a long time back from University of Auckland, but I'm drawn into this course about the public policies. I currently work for New South Wales Health Pathology in the specialization of genomics. So we are heavily policy, compliance, ethics, these kinds of elements driven department. So I'm curious to know what are the public policies involved and how does that shape the research. So that is my interest in this course. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you, Gavi, for that introduction. It was excellent. So we also have, who's joined us now, we have Nathan and Jonas. And you're welcome to show your faces and unmute your microphones if you want to ask a question. You can either put your hand up on the bar, sorry, I can't remember the name of the bar now. Oh, the chat bar, or you can actually just put your open up your sorry, I've suddenly gone. I think Ola's going to have to edit this one. Thank you. Let's move on to Murray. Murray, I guess I feel like we've already started this, so I wonder if you could, in the redevelopment and redesign of the public policy module, what were your aims?
Yes, so we did redevelop the 5-week eGrad school public policy module just this year, hot off the press. And actually, I haven't quite finished it because you might have noticed that week 5 isn't actually published yet. I've got most of the content there, but I just need to fix it up a little bit. Well, I've still got 4 weeks, so that should be enough time. So yes, it's a module that I feel really needed a few touch-ups, and what I really wanted to do with it was to highlight the direct relationship between public policy and research. I think previously there was great information about what public policy is, and there was an entire section on how it related to research. But I wanted to weave research through the entire thing. I want to really integrate it into the information, and so my one kind of aim from the beginning was to show where in the research process public policy may have relevance, particularly from the point of view of recommendations that come out of research. The research that I have done and the research of HDR students that I supervise and involved in they all of the recommendations that occur in the in discussion after the results section, the discussion in implications, they all have relevance to something that should be changed in the world. And when something is to be changed in the world, it's quite often a change that can occur in a public policy, something that government might need to be aware of in particular, that that your research recommends should be different. And so, I mean, it's not every piece of research, but I think it's really common that there's recommendations that come out of pieces of research. And so, really, I wanted to kind of walk researchers who participate in this module through how that could occur. What's the relationship between that recommendation and how it might actually get implemented in the world through a government process? That's kind of it. I wanted to kind of break it down into something that isn't just a policy over there, but something that's directly relevant to everyone in their research. I suppose there's some piece of research, maybe highly technical, kind of in the sciences, that might not have public policy implications, but I think it's more common than what we might think.
Yeah, I'd agree. Well, what about your own research, Murray? Like in terms of policy and its opportunities for policy or options?
Yeah, well, the research that I do now probably is not as relevant as the research I did when I was doing my PhD as far as public policy is concerned. The topic that I focused on in my PhD revolved around land use planning and resource management and the amount of land required for the production and consumption of basic resources. And fundamental to kind of the whole reason for me doing this piece of research was I figured that in the future, in a more energy constrained world, we would probably need our resources produced and consumed closer to where the population is than where we are now. I kind of imagined a less international traded world and a more locally produced world, and wondered how much land would be required for that. And so public policy implications came out of that, generally actually at a more of a local level. And I would sort of suggest that there should be policies around the a more widespread production of resources at both a local scale and a state scale and a national scale. I was just thinking actually this morning when thinking about this conversation that bizarrely that there's an anti-internationalism, I think, occurring in the world at the moment, led by none other than the President of the United States. And in some ways, I was actually kind of suggesting that we should be more aware of the resources that we need to produce locally, and something that like the tariffs that Trump puts forward actually and COVID as well brought this issue up, that if those international chains are broken, it's actually hard to get some of those resources. Now, I think what I actually found was Australia's particularly from a food production point of view, Australia's in a pretty good position. Australia is one of the few places that produces more food than what it consumes. So for these basic resources, Australia is probably reasonably good. I didn't really look at more of the tech, the high tech industries. I didn't really look at that. I looked at more basic stuff. I guess Australia probably isn't very self-sufficient in high tech. But anyway, going back to the question, I wrote a couple of papers and was actually invited to a local government forum on local self-sufficiency in the Sunshine Coast. I was invited by another, I think it might have been the Redlands Council, another kind of local Brisbane council, to review their policy on it, on that issue too. So while I haven't had direct experience in government policy, in some of the outcomes and the recommendations that I was making from that piece of research did seem to have some sort of resonance with a couple of local councils at the time, because they were looking at their policy. And so I guess I was certainly a direct consultant to one of them, and was invited as part of the discussion for another.
Yeah. Well, that in many ways, your role there, Murray, as a researcher, that sort of says to me that researchers there are many roles available to researchers in terms of working with public policy. Sorry, you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to agree that the examples that I just gave are probably less obvious ones. The more obvious ones might be for researchers to get jobs in government involved in policy. But I wanted to hire, but I mean, there's going to be a reasonably small number of researchers, I would expect. So in redeveloping this module, I wanted to highlight that in coming up with well-founded ideas for the way that society should be structured in the future, it's a part of a researcher's role to also kind of try and bring that to the world. Influencing government in some way is one way that can be done. And the way that government operates is through putting forward legislation. Policy informs the legislation. Policy is kind of legislation. So, in this, I guess the module's only up to week 1, and so I haven't kind of covered all the content that's in the module. But yeah, in the module you'll find that there's different ways that researchers can influence policy.
Yeah, that's great, because I think I shared earlier with you that my background, I found myself, I work mainly in the not-for-profit sectors, so I work mainly in the multicultural human rights and justice area, and it was that interrelationship with government, and I guess I learnt public policy from that perspective, and and the role that you played. And then we have policy officers, I guess, that work in government departments, which is, I don't know how new it is. I sort of keep feeling that policy has become more and more aware, like governments have become more aware of the need for actual specialists in the policy field, like members of parliament. There are policy officers, who do a lot of that work. And sorry, I have been instructed. There is a Nirosha has said her research is on the risk factor for adolescent males' perpetration of family and domestic violence. This is not directly related to policy, but the end result will be important. My sense is, when I look at that, is to say that there probably is a direct relationship with public policy. What do you think, Murray?
Well,
In terms of
definitely.
addressing.
I mean, the piece of research like that seem like the most obvious places where public policy is relevant, where there is direct societal impacts of people's actions, and it's being researched. Maybe the research includes analysis of existing policy, and then recommendations for how that policy is working well, or maybe it could be changed in the future. So yeah, it seems like these kind of issues-based piece of research are really public policy is core, I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I think I've learned that more and more as time goes on. It's a little bit like, we have laws. We have a law for everything. We even have a law for, I don't know, buying your coffee, in terms of if you don't pay, well, you've committed a misdemeanor, there's all sorts of things. So how I'm starting to see the world is that with public policy, that sort of underpins a lot of how laws are made, and how our societies work, and how our societies decide, like the globally, also the factors around climate change, etc.
Yeah, there's an interesting kind of statement, because not really a question, by Nirosha. I'm not sure. Was that Nirosha whose topic we were just discussing, or was that someone else's? I'm sorry, I missed the name at the start of that.
Nirosha that we were just discussing, yeah.
Oh, right. So it's not. My view is that once you have a recommendation for something that should be changed in society, that is likely to have relevance to public policy. Regardless of whether it's qualitative research or quantitative research, you have some finding, if this is what has happened, you have some finding that has implications for people in a societally based topic. It's likely to have some implication for what the laws are. If you have any recommendations around what about government's role within your topic, then that has relevance to public policy, I would have thought.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with something like domestic violence, for example, a lot of the recommendations, about restraining orders, etc., that's really, when you think about it, that's in the field of psychology, sociology. It's kind of like behaviours. So how do we change behaviours? And this is what public policy does, I believe, when we're writing up public policy, that we are looking at that. Like, I'm sure Deanna has many examples of climate change in the environment. And many of you, I've been reading your posts, you're all working in fields that attitudes, mindsets, etc. And this is sometimes, for me, Murray, I don't know if you agree, sometimes the subtler aspects of things like that people don't kind of like. So it's not a government statement, but it's actually looking at behaviours and how society comes together and works together.
Yeah, and I guess that's the aim of the module, to reinforce the relevance of public policy to many researchers.
Yeah, I agree. Now, Jonas has written something. He says, she said, my research is in assessing Australia's capability to produce high-strength steels using local raw materials. While it has a technical focus, a lot of the insights will most likely point towards a need for supportive policies. Murray, how would you respond to that?
Well, I'd suggest
Another statement.
that again is that this module should be useful to you, because
Exactly.
there's different ways. There's different ways that you can influence public policy that the module will get to. I mean, initially, week one is just kind of introducing some of the concepts. But I think it's important for researcher not just to stay in some obscure document that no one ever reads. The idea is if you found something important and worthwhile, then one, it's good to share it with people who might find it interesting and relevant, and two, it's good to be able to try and influence society to be directed into a way that you've identified. That statement was intentionally kind of generic because research has so many different directions. But in this case, if you find that there is something that government can do to that will make it better for Australia's capability to produce high strength steel, or that currently there is some legislation that is preventing it, some sort of legislation that is impeding or encouraging, do more of this, less of that, then I think it's worthwhile putting that to the government in some way to or getting out in sharing that with others in a way that might eventually lead to change.
Exactly.
There's a couple of people with their hands up, I think.
Yeah. Bhargavi and then Deanna. Bhargavi, would you like to put your
Yes.
comment or question?
My question will be about the new emerging field, the AI, and the policies and securities around it. But if I wanted to check with Deanna whether she had a comment about the previous topic, so we can close the topic and move on to this AI topic. Is that something you want to add, Diana?
Oh, thanks, Bhargavi. No, I just wanted to do it. It's just a general point, so feel free to go ahead first.
Sure. So as I touched on the topic AI, and it is rapidly emerging across almost all the fields, and it has a serious implications on various things like, first would be jobs, and then there will be a ripple effect on different industries about what are the next skills that need to be in skill list and stuff like that. But I feel like there is not enough policies or regulations or security frameworks around, and it is not as quick as AI is growing up. We're still catching up on this. And given this lack of gatekeeping for such new areas, what steps, or do you think this course will have some strong frameworks or foundations to look into to make those policies around the professionals? What should be the responsibilities in shaping these policies and security standards for AI? So do you think this course will have such insights, or that's an open question. Yes.
Is your question from a point of view of your own research, or from just an observation on AI?
In my own research, in my own work, yes, there are AIs catching up. So mine is a genomics service. So we're looking at the new genomic technologies, what is in current research, implementing them in the pathology setting so we can provide that as a service to the patients. That's where my core work is. And again, as I said, there are new softwares, new machine language AI things coming into the picture, and everyone is kind of argy-bargy about it, like, oh my God, we don't know what it is capable of, how we can implement or not to implement these. And yeah, so if that makes sense.
I guess before talking about AI in particular, maybe I have an observation that as researchers, particularly those that are have a piece of research that is reasonably high profile, or even just doing an HDR degree, has a certain standing, I think, in society that is recognised as kind of having expertise. And so, from a public policy perspective, I think researchers perhaps may have more standing in what they say than just anyone else off the street. And so I guess on kind of the reason I asked, is it your particular research focus? I think whatever topic it is, if it's something that you are heavily involved in researching, then you come to the discussion with a level of kind of with a reputation, and that is why I was, when I was doing my PhD, why I was asked to participate in a public forum, and then I got paid for doing a review of a document from another local council. That wasn't if I was just someone off the street, I wouldn't have got those gigs. And so
Correct.
I guess the important thing is that being a researcher gives you a standing in and having some expertise in some fields, and that actually gives you a stronger voice. And so if your research is if the topic is AI, then you're more likely to be able to have influence if you have found something from your research, or maybe even if you're finding that it's an impediment or an opportunity within your research, people are more likely, I would think, to be willing to listen to you. So that's not to talk about anything about the actual issue of AI. That's just an observation about your standing as a researcher.
Yeah. Thank you, Murray. Deanna, you're next for a question, please, or
Thanks.
comment.
Well, just in terms of AI, I think it's really clear at the moment that every single professional body and every single level of government are looking at policies and looking at guidance around AI and the use of AI, and from a whole range of facets. So it's certainly, there's a lot of work going on everywhere. My point was quite random. I was at a conference in the UK last year, I think it was, and I had one of the top educational experts from Australia sitting there with his arms crossed, listening to me talking, and he'd torn everyone else to pieces. He was really quite vicious. But at the end of my talk, he basically just said, "Well, so what?" And I think the point I want to make is, when you're converting research into this kind of actionable policy type stuff and recommendations, is that step in between is to ask the question, so what, who cares? Because, it's that translation between the fluffiness, and I must say my research is quite conceptual. It doesn't seem to have direct recommendations. It's quite hard. And so I really found the Gen AI exercise this week really quite useful to force me to, and it probably is going to force me to rethink my research questions. But I think that "so what, who cares" question allows you then to say, okay, who is my research going to impact? Who actually, who's this got impact on, and who, what's it all about? And that's a useful step then to start thinking, for me, into the next stage of policy and applications.
Exactly. That's great, Deanna. It's very.
What was your
What was
your topic, Deanna, that you were talking
it was
about?
the stuff I've been writing about. It's like conceptualizing real world learning, and looking at how we conceptualize it. But it's all very high up.
So we should introduce Deanna as another staff member at QUT as well.
Yes, I'm so sorry, Deanna.
Deanna is a participant.
Yeah, I'm a student.
is a student of this module, but is a curriculum designer at QUT. So it's great to have you along, and also a moderator of another module, eGrad school module in the past. Are you still doing that, or is that?
Yeah,
you're still doing that this year.
Yes, I think I've attended Deanna's module. I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah, and my apologies, Deanna. Deanna does some great work. Yeah, really appreciate. I was really humbled when I saw. I thought, oh my God, Deanna's going to be here. As who I'm going to go. I say, it's okay. It's okay. Much. She's support. Well, it's we're very lucky actually to have people like Deanna and Murray, who take on these works and these tasks and do the work that they do. Certainly, I don't know what I'd do without everybody. So there you go.
Thanks, Anna. But I
Yes.
think, Diana, you make a good point around AI policy, and was part of Bagavi's initial point that policy seems to be lagging practice. I mean, it does. I mean, that's not uncommon, but particularly in this area of AI, it's just moving so fast that the policy can't really keep up. And that not only within government, but I know from the university's perspective, like the university policy is also like struggling to keep up with what is available, and that's around particularly around assessment for undergrad courses, but also in research. I actually have a new role to look at QT policy and for AI in the research area. So that will be something interesting. That has policy relevance. I guess this module itself, though, focuses, given it's public policy, it isn't so much the policy within organisations as much as the policy within levels of government.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, both of you, for that. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I was wondering if there was any work has been done in the background. So that is very assuring. Something is being done.
Something is being done in what way, do you mean?
Like you're saying there in QED also, like in the education sector, there has been some work done around policies with AI as it was emerging. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I can't talk to government. I'm not sure how much
definitely
work
we all have to work from our own little departments and make a
yeah.
collective effort for the bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think universities are, from what I can see, every university is scrambling to try to keep up, and some are slightly ahead of others. But
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
kind of important to look at just to see what other from the university perspective. Interesting to see what other universities are doing.
Yeah. I like that you've included some AI activities in the modules, Murray, because I've also been listening, because I'm not to show my age, but I've been a bit pushing back AI in terms of using it. But I have noted that there have been on the ABC radio a number of cases of students being told that they breached what is it, ethics, because their papers had X number of percentage of AI, and so students are trying to kind of push back on that and say, no, we didn't use AI. But is this kind of like a normal struggle that happens when something new comes up? I ask that. I'm asking all of you really in a sense. It's like because from the radio interviews, it sounds as if that when something new, like Jonas, I'll let you make your comment next. Where's Jonas? No? Oh, Belinda.
There we go. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, so I couldn't find the unmute button for a second. No, thanks for letting me speak. I was gonna actually let you just finish. I thought you had a really good point. So if you want to complete your thought, I'm more than happy to just go after you.
No, it's well, I guess as a researcher, I can look at it and go, we research. And I think it's this comment Murray, you made, policy lagging practice, the policies do seem to lag the practice, even in fields like domestic violence that have been around for ages. And I've lived that experience. So now I want to move on to you, Jonas. I can get quite passionate.
No worries. Thanks. I like the point you touched on. So I guess my initial question was actually more along the lines of kind of how far this whole AI policy scope is. Because I mean, it's one thing obviously to kind of regulate and kind of almost kind of regulate the use of this technology as a technical tool, versus considering the broader and pretty far-reaching societal impact that this technology has had and will continue to have, right? So, like in my opinion, it's not just a question of regulating the actual behavioral use, but also reconsidering, I guess, how we structure our entire almost educational system. I mean, recently, what we have, and we have the issue that we have no understanding of civics when we come through primary or high school. We have no understanding, or we're not taught media literacy. I'm seeing a significant lack of critical thinking capabilities amongst the students I'm teaching. This is especially true. This is just a generalistic statement. This isn't, this is especially true of students who've grown up with the internet. They just tend to kind of deal worse to a certain extent with interacting with these kind of tools. So I guess my question is more along the lines of how far-reaching is this policy change? Because this one societal impact requires almost a complete reset of how, especially Australia, is going to be approaching its almost fundamental societal structures. So we're talking specifically about education and getting people ready before they even hit the workforce, before they even get to high school, even to university level, to actually engage with and actually think about ethical practices, specifically civic duties, media literacy, actually training them up to a higher critical thinking capability than what was before. And I've seen talks also QT about researchers restructuring entire units to incorporate AI, which have then required them to emphasize critical thinking and problem solving abilities on their student side. And what was immediately evident as soon as they did that is that the performance across the board dropped by 2 to 3 grade scores across the board, which I think just goes back to the original point of this whole tool use requires a significant restructuring in the way that we approach educating and kind of training students or professionals across the board. So I just want to kind of know if that's been considered, or how far, I guess, this problem is in you guys' understanding.
Murray.
Are you a school teacher, Johannes, or you're talking about teaching yourself?
Yeah, I've got a passion for teaching. So I'm currently researching a PhD at QT, but I'm doing it specifically to get into teaching at some point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I mean, AI certainly had a huge impact on education, and I guess I can speak directly about QUT's policy around AI in research. Maybe not as in touch with teaching of coursework units. Deanna probably has much. She's probably overwhelmed by lecturers with problems with assessment, I would imagine. So I'd be interested also in your take, Deanna. But I can say that for research, perhaps it's not as big a problem as for coursework within universities, given that research students have always had a much tighter relationship with research staff. An HDR student will have direct meetings with their supervisor and will be providing work in an ongoing way, so that the supervisor usually has a fair idea of their progress and their abilities throughout, whereas coursework students can be reasonably anonymous in the system, and the assessment for them traditionally through assignments is easily reproduced through AI. Now, a lot of writing for research can also be reproduced through AI, but the other thing that research has that sets it apart is that the research project itself is, by its very nature, an original project, and is originally investigating something that the researcher has come up with. And so while much of the writing up of it, AI can certainly help with, and perhaps can do more than what it should. In some cases, the fundamental premise of research is to discover something new. I'm pretty optimistic about the role of AI in the research process, given that I think it can help a lot with the writing up of what is found. That some people, it isn't their particular skill. It can help them produce the words. It can frame the research and help them to share their research in a more productive way. Hopefully not at the expense of the quality of the research. Hopefully it can make researchers more productive and to be able to focus on the parts of research that demand that human intervention, which is the findings part of the research. If you consider what does get written up for research, the first parts are what is all the background to this particular question. In running some sort of experiment or activity, what is it that comes out of that to answer the question? And then let's discuss all of the implications of what we found. And so that the actual generation of the data is something that you can't just ask ChatGPT to come up with. There needs to be some sort of activity on the researcher's behalf. And so, but at either end, I see no reason why the LLMs can't have a big role to play. One of the problems, though, I guess, is that I see the appropriateness of that role of AI for students to be quite different than staff. The problem with students' reliance on it for writing a literature review, for example, is that a student is actually meant to be demonstrating that they have the skills to be able to do this themselves. Whereas an experienced researcher, they don't necessarily need to justify their existence as a researcher. They just need to come up with the evidence that they have done this research and that it is worthwhile. And so there are two groups maybe within researchers for what is perhaps acceptable and what is not. The way I like to think of it is that if it's okay to get a research assistant to do the work, then it's probably okay to get AI to do the work. Now, for a student, that is different than for a researcher, university staff member, for example, where staff members can quite rightly employ a research assistant to do their literature review, but a student can't. It isn't okay for a student to employ someone to do their literature review. So that's kind of an example of how I would split the two. And so, from a policy perspective, maybe getting back to partly about what this module is about from a policy perspective, at least at QUT, we have concentrated mostly initially on highlighting what the risks are for students and staff in research around the use of AI. But what we're actually wanting to do more of now is to encourage the use of it in a productive and responsible way. So, and I think it's maybe it's a little easier as I started this conversation, it's a little easier to do that in research than it is in undergrad.
Thank you for that, Murray. Certainly much to ponder on. Belinda, would you like to ask your question or make a contribution in whatever way you feel?
Oh, I was just thinking when Murray was talking about policy and being behind practice, I've been in education in the high school sector for a very long time, and then I started teaching at university this year. And it's actually really interesting when I think about when AI policy first came out. QCAA, that's the organisation that deals in Queensland with the schools across the board, and the education department turned around about 2 years ago and said every school needs to have an AI policy. They did not tell us what needed to be in the policy, but they said you need to have an AI policy. So then we had a bunch of deputy principals who have never been trained in anything to do with policy scrambling to write policy to deal with education policy on AI. And then the policies ended up just being, you can't use AI. So we had lots of young people in schools across Queensland going, okay, what's AI? What is this thing? Because they've just told me that I can't use it. So now I'm going to go and see what it is, and I'm going to find out exactly what it is.
I'm going to use it. If I can't use it, this sounds interesting.
And then we just had all of these young people who traditionally were getting C's all of a sudden producing assignments that were very, very in depth and with a lot more detail and very interesting Americanized language. So all of a sudden we had all of this stuff happening. So this is where I found the equity issue all of a sudden coming in as well when it comes to AI. Schools that had the money were able then to, and the time and the resourcing were then able to start supporting their students and understanding how to use AI ethically. So you had lots of inner city schools training young people on how to use AI and explaining how AI worked, whereas a lot of low socioeconomic schools couldn't fit it into the curriculum. So all of a sudden there was a disparity in results coming out. Again, because those students that were able to utilize AI and implement it as a part of their learning process were able to then move up in what they were doing, whereas those students that didn't understand it were able to use it in a sense of, I'm going to put this in and I'm going to get an assignment out of this. But teachers were then learning what they could identify as AI and what they couldn't identify as AI. So all of a sudden policy at the different schools was changing. So a policy in one school was different to another school. So the consistency piece across education schools was then also becoming a factor. And so as time has sort of churned through what's happening with AI when it comes to schooling at a high school level, there still is this huge difference between the equity of what's happening in some schools as compared to other schools. And so we have young people that are coming into university knowing how to use it and use it well, and then students that don't know how to use it well. And I think that's where, if we're really going to look at policy, it needs to be taken back to that level at a state and a federal level and saying, okay, let's now start guiding policy for schools so that we don't have people at schools that have never actually had anything to do with policy, creating policy, because they don't understand AI and how it works as well. And it's really interesting because then coming in and doing some teaching and some marking at a university level, and then seeing that, because I work with students that are graduate, diploma and master's levels, and as I'm reviewing their work, I'm sitting there going, okay, we both know this is AI. Not going to say it out loud, but we know it is. But then there's that whole portion of what's okay, what's not okay, and there is no way to prove AI. I mean, you can see all of the markers when you're sort of like, everyone can read through a document and go, oh, okay, that's sort of like a little bit of a tell. But then looking at policy, how, like, what is it that we can do to move that forward? So I find that very, very interesting that we've got the students moving up from schools into universities and still using that wrong process. And then it kind of starts building little drones because people can't think creatively because they're using a system to think creatively for them and critically for them. But yeah, no, that was just my thoughts.
Yeah,
Deanna, oh, sorry, Murray.
I think from a policy perspective, you've raised a good point around what is the best scale for any particular policy to be to be integrated into the whatever system it is. And so education, there's always a bit of a tension around what is the best scale, isn't it? Like, is it best to have a school at a school scale? Is it best to have it at the state scale? I saw recently that there was a new federal policy on the way to teach, was it literacy in primary schools? I think it was coming out from
that's
a
coming out at the
federal.
moment. Yeah.
So that's coming out at the highest level.
Yeah.
There's probably pushback from from some schools who might be quite happy with the way that they're currently doing it. So yeah, it's interesting. I think you've raised a good point of there is likely to be an optimal and possibly changeable ideal scale of policy.
Deanna.
Yeah, I just wanted to link the points that Murray made around QUT and policies around learning and teaching, but also link it to Belinda, the way you've shown it tracking in schools, this immediate panic to secure things. And that's nationally, certainly from TEXA, the national governing body for universities. They've put out a kind of policy diktat saying that we need to secure assessments, across all courses. And that has led to a scurrying of internal policy creation at QUT. So one of the major things that has been going on, and Johannes, you're absolutely right, in terms of people having to rewrite and recreate their assessments, is making sure that assessments are secure and as highly trusted as possible to any Gen AI use. So the one policy is around saying, well, there are a certain amount of assessments where we can absolutely guarantee students can't use Gen AI, like sitting an exam or doing a kind of oral viva type situation. Whereas what's also now being distinguished is across all of the other assessments saying, yes, you're absolutely welcome to use Gen AI, because there's a recognition we need to teach and practice and assess students using Gen AI in their disciplinary spaces. So it's kind of twofold. It's the very secure assessments and the training and the upskilling and the teaching of the Gen AI. But Johannes, your point about critical thinking, as Belinda's also just said, is loud and clear. And I think, it's quite interesting, because what this is driving us back to is assessments where we're actually having critical dialogues again, and where the assessments that are the highly trusted ones and the ones that we know that students might learn more is where we're actually expecting them to engage in dialogue and do that hard thinking and be questioned in a kind of hard way. And there's a real snag here, because it's expensive. When you've got classes of 1,000, to sit down and have a critical dialogue with 1,000 students, it becomes very, very tricky. And higher education has become so huge and so massified that there's now this tension, because actually to have the meaningful learning and the meaningful engagement is incredibly costly. And we can't just revert to exams. That's the gut instinct, is just to push everything back to exams. So there's a real tension there between, what the policy wants to do, but actually how we learn. And I think, you might be interested to know, a lot of universities, and, we've been discussing it a little bit, is just actually, as you said, Johannes, completely upending how students could be learning, and thinking about, for example, do we take assessment completely out of learning? And for example, some universities, students only learn in first year and second year, and all the assessment is kind of at the end as they do formative assessment all the way, but actually the big hard assessment pieces are just the big hard ones at the end. We know we over assess already. So, rethinking in entirety, how education works is critical. But that's also, I would say that universities are actually informing national conversations. If we're going to talk about practice informing policy again, we have the national policy knee-jerk to try and secure things and say, yes, we secured it. But actually, it's people trialing things on the ground at various universities that are the people that can push change.
Excellent. Thank you, Deanna. Murray, did you have a comment?
I think it also, from a researcher's point of view, and from this module, it also talks to needing to be in the right place at the right time in order to influence policy. There's all these cycles within cycles, and
Yes.
that even though you might be agitating for policy changes, generally there is a time when government is open to change, and other times when they're not. And I guess particularly around AI, it's recognised that this is kind of a new area and that things need to change because what was happening before just isn't applicable or isn't going to work so well anymore. So I think change is inevitable in this space, but it's you never quite know when the timing is going to be right. So I guess have your recommendations handy, because is one thing to get out of it. Have your recommendations and policy changes handy, because you never know when the opportunity is going to arise.
Well, that's right. Exactly. I like the way you framed that. Thank you so much, Deanna Murray. I am a bit cognizant of the time, but I've really enjoyed listening to the questions from those of you in the audience. And Murray and Deanna, thank you for your contributions. They're really invaluable. And I think that for me, public policy is absolutely critical for now, especially now as I have, that's the word that. It's kind of like I didn't know what public policy was. It's like when you're young, when you're in your early years of even university, it's really hard to understand. But we are becoming much more educated now, even at that stage. And the policies that all of the areas that you're working in, take heart and keep going, because it's so important. And I don't think we realise how important you individual research work is with those unique ideas and understandings that you come to us with. Okay, are there any final comments from anyone? Murray, Deanna? Oh, someone has a question. I have a question regarding the impact of research. My study is about building collaboration between public health decision makers and researchers in Saudi Arabia. During my interviews, many decision makers express concern that they sometimes hesitate to base their decisions on individual studies, preferring instead high-quality research. In this context, what should researchers do to better influence decision-making or even policy? Over to you, Murray.
This is a complex one. I guess.
I know.
We've got like and answer it in 30 seconds. That's all the time we have left.
I'm terrible, aren't I?
I'd want to know. I guess the thrust of the module is your research is going to find something. You're going to make some sort of recommendation in your research as a result of something you found. How are you then going to take it to the people that matter? And so, I can't actually answer your question. What should researchers do to better influence decision making or even policy? Because there are multiple ways that can happen. And if you get to the end of this module and you still don't know, maybe send me an email, because I might need to update the module in that case. So my answer is stay tuned, because if you haven't found the answer to that question yet, you might in future weeks.
I actually think, Murray, on that, your final week 5, advocacy and influence is probably going to play a role. What I can say to you, Ella, from my experience, because I worked at the not-for-profit sector, so it was really community development at the ground level, and that's where I learnt about public policy. But there are a lot of players. So with your study in building collaboration between public health decision makers, who are the public health decision makers? And remember that your public health decision makers are not just your Minister for Health at the top, they're your nursing or your support staff, even at the very. So you've actually got all these layers of it. But yes, we have hit the time. But Anna,
I guess
put it in
your research
post.
should identify who those stakeholders are, and
Yeah, actually, that's
once you
true.
get to the point in your research, it should be more obvious to you how you can answer that question yourself, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that, Murray. Thank you for that. But certainly post it. There's a question. Yes. No. Okay. People are going now. Yes, the time has come, and we say bye-bye. Thank you so much for an absolutely wonderful session. Thank you, and particularly to our guests, Deanna and Murray. You're a guest now, Deanna. What to say? Thank you so much. All the best to you, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
See you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.